Hello and welcome, Sarboss here to give you a beginner's guide on how to set up TG station-based Space Station 13 servers with MariaDB and get the database running so you can get database bans, admins, all that good stuff. First thing you need to do is download MariaDB, so just type that into Google, go to the downloads page, download MariaDB server. You're going to want to get the stable version. Currently this is the 10.4 series. You're looking for the Win-x64 MSI. This is the installer for Windows on x64. If you're using a 32-bit PC, you'll want to use the Win32 MSI, obviously, but most of you will be on x64 for the most part. Go ahead and let the download run. Once it completes, go ahead and open it. Click through all the warnings that gives you. Windows may complain about potential malware. It's not. Just go ahead and run it. Click through next, accept the terms and conditions. You don't want to install client programs, and you don't want to install development components. Normally you want to install HiDSQL, but I already have a more up-to-date copy installed, so I'm also not going to install this, but you want to keep this installed. You'll need it for later. So do not uninstall HiDSQL. Set the root password. You can set this to anything you want. For me, for this tutorial, I'm just going to use password. Go ahead and enable UTF-8 as the default server character set. These you can leave as their defaults. You can install it as a service and call it MariaDB. Enable networking and leave it on the default MySQL port of 3306. Data collection, blah blah. I do it personally. It's up to you. Go ahead and click through the installer and the UAC prompt that comes up. It should install fairly quickly. And once that's done, you now have a MySQL server running. Now let's get it configured for SS13. First thing we'll need to do is create the database and tables we'll be using. Open up HiDSQL, and you want to set the library to libMariaDB, the network type to MySQL TCP/IP. Leave the host name as 127.0.0.1 or localhost. Username will use root, and password same as you entered in the installation screen. As another disclaimer, don't use password, obviously. Use something better than that. Go ahead and click open to start the connection. Go over to the query tab. Now first we need to create the database. So to do this, you'll run the following SQL. Create database, and then whatever you want to name it. Just make sure it's one word. Don't use spaces. And keep it lowercase for sanity. Let's call this one TGDB. When you're done, click the play button to execute the query. You now have an empty database. So now we need to populate it. You can also see this if you hit the refresh button here. TGDB, no tables. So now we're going to run the following. We're going to use TGDB, then a semicolon, and now we need the SQL to fill it with. Right here is the latest master branch of TG Station. We're going to want to go to the SQL folder. There's a choice to make here. You can either use the regular schema or the prefix schema. It's completely up to preference. I like to use the regular schema. Hit Control-A to select everything and paste it into the HiDSQL prompt. Once that's done, hit execute. Should run through without errors. There's one more query we need to run to set the database revision. To find the latest one, go to database changelog.txt, and usually it's one of these first few lines here. For the non-prefix schema, we're going to run this line. So we're going to copy that, paste in here, and run it. Okay, our database is now fully set up. The last thing we need to do, you can go ahead and close the HiDSQL now. Last thing we need to do is configure our server to connect to it. So we're going to go to config, dbconfig.txt. First, we're going to uncomment SQL enabled. We're going to leave the address as localhost. Obviously, if you're hosting the DB somewhere else, you're going to want to set this to something else. Port, we also left as 3306. For feedback database, the name of the database we created, we're going to set this to TGDB. Now for prefixing, if you use the prefix schema, you're going to want to leave this as SS13 underscore. Otherwise, since we use the non-prefix schema, we want to get rid of this. Keep this setting though. Now, there's the school security that says you should never use the root login for any day-to-day operations. Generally, you should follow this and create a new user with its own password with limits on the database, but frankly, if you're just running this server for you and your friends, and this SQL server isn't going to be accessible anywhere but your own PC, you can go ahead and use the root user. So root and password is password. The rest of these we can leave as their defaults. Now I've already compiled the game, so it's ready to go. Save the config. Bring up Dream Daemon. And set the DMB, security to trusted of course, because TG requires that, and launch it. Once it starts up, you can go ahead and jump into the game. If everything worked right, you should see the round ID set to a not null value. That's how to set up the database with SS13. Have a good day. Boss signing out.